If you take this guitar, there are several things you can do with it. And there are several ways to explore its strings, right? So you can just basically play strings one by one, individually. Or you can play on one same string. Or, of course, you can play on all the strings together. Just to come up with maybe a personal melody. So, what I'd like to suggest is that passions and hobbies and all kinds of activities actually are exactly the same thing as those strings. And it's actually my passion for exploration, my love of exploration that let me grow in various artistic fields and led me to realize how powerful combining different activities can be. And I think that exploration has two different dimensions. It has a navigational dimension, it has a deepening dimension. So we can just navigate through different types of activities and jump from one to another, and we can go deeper and deeper and focus on just one same practice. And to illustrate this idea, I'd like to share my experience and part of my exploratory journey throughout several passions that I developed. And the first one is photography. I discovered my passion for photography during my master's degree in architecture. And so I got into architectural photography, and what I learned is that architectural photography is not just about taking a beautiful picture of a building. It's more subtle than that. You know, our reaction when we see architectural photography should not be, wow, that's a beautiful picture, but rather, wow, that's a beautiful building. So it's very subtle. I had to study it in depth and practice it a lot. And eventually what happened is that it served me in architecture because I acquired a more sensitive eye on the importance of light and shades and the relationship between them and materials and their properties. And I eventually got even a better sense of proportions in architectural design itself. So really, photography helped me in architecture, so that was already interesting to me. And then I began a journey throughout different kinds of photography, such as city photography, and that was turned out pretty different from architecture, and I learned new things from there, and I went to discover street photography as well, and that was very interesting as well because it has a very spontaneous aspect. And I got deeper into it by focusing on very particular themes, such as shooting children, for instance, and I really loved that a lot. And so that made me go deeper because I really had to think of what is the best way to express that particular theme. Then I went to shooting landscapes, and with landscapes, of course, I had to show the whole scenery in front of me, so I had to learn how to make panoramas and stitching pictures all together. And eventually I could apply this technique to architecture and city photography as well. So actually, every time I start something new, I don't know in advance what I'm going to learn or how I'm going to benefit from it, but every time I do, I really learn something, and it nourishes my general practices. And one of the most important things that I learned in photography, and this variety of types, is that even 1 degree in an angle of view can make a big difference in a picture. Now, one day, an artistic director from a company called Transcendence called me, and she was actually a friend of mine, and she asked me to shoot one of her live performance shows. And, you know, when you ask someone who's been just shooting buildings and nature, so basically just static subjects in broad daylight most of the time, to shoot, you know, a live performance in the dark with people jumping around, it's like asking a mechanic to remove someone's tooth, you know, it's very risky, you know, just don't do it. So what happens that at that time, I never did that before, and I didn't even have the right equipment to shoot it. And also, she told me that half of the performance is gonna be lit with just one single candle. I mean, come on, that's not a lot of light. So I had all the perfect excuses to refuse that mission, and of course I accepted. And it turned out pretty good, actually, and she called me back for another project on which we collaborated together, and that was really a great experience. We made a photo exhibition out of it, which is still alive today and traveling from one place to another. Thank you. So it was a beautiful performance, really rich in emotions, and I mean, this guy is incredible, and in this picture I always think, you know, it's like a mechanic just removed one of his tooth, you know? Anyway, so to another activity, an artistic field that I got passionate about, it's digital art and photomontage. And what is photomontage? Basically is gathering pictures from different sources, mashing them up together and come up with an illustration, very harmonious illustration. So just to give you a quick example of an unlikely scenario that I thought of, I just start with a flower feed and I add a guy there, okay? But I don't really like the expression on his face, so I just change it a little bit, okay? And I go on with a few more twists, and I add a friend of him there, but I didn't really like his head neither, so I just chop it off and replace it with a leopard, and there is the final image. Now, don't ask me how I thought of this. I don't know. It's just like there are fireworks in my brain sometimes. I don't know how I came with this idea. So what was really exciting to me is that I could think of anything in my head. Once I master the tools, I can just make illustrations, no matter how crazy they are. And I remember one day I dreamt of a horse playing football with Cristiano Ronaldo. And well, just made it, you know? Really had lots of fun with doing it. So how I got deeper into that, and the way I got deeper is I go through what I call mind shifts. And basically, mind shifts to me is like getting out of the usual path and starting to do something new, you know, in the same field. So what I started to do is trying different styles and techniques. So I remember one day I was very bored at home, alone, and I did this, you know. And this is pretty representative of the mess that's going on in my head sometimes, but it's very different in style compared to the previous ones. So I really tried to do something new, and I tried new techniques, but still using the same tools as I used to do. And I also tried hand drawing, again, using the same softwares. Now, there's still another passion of mine I didn't talk about, which is composing music and playing on piano. So one day I had an idea. I thought, hey, why don't I extend the soul of my music pieces into another dimension? So what I started to do is creating illustrations for my pieces of music that express in the best way the concept of the music. So here I started to combine music and photomontage. And the idea, I really liked the idea, so I applied it to other pieces of music. And actually I started to become more and more aware of, you know, the potential of combining different skills together. So what I started to do is actually applying exactly the same process of photomontage to my architectural projects. And I call this inviting people into my imagination, actually. So there's another good example as well of like strumming all the strings of a guitar, right? And it's a project of a hotel that I worked on. I start with a basic sketch, you know, hand sketch, and I build it in 3D model. And what's about this building is that it was called the Pearl, so I wanted to be very homogeneous. So I got this idea of covering the whole building with some kind of skin, so I had to work on the drawings and texture of that skin. I tried different ones, and finally I chose one of them. And there was still one step ahead, which is making this model look more photorealistic, which involves learning new softwares again. So basically the result we see here is a combination of architectural design, hand drawing, 3D modeling, texturing research, computer-generated image, as well as photography, because in photography I learned how to choose the best angle of view to show a project. So this is a really good example of how I strummed all the strings of my guitar. So I started applying this to most of my architecture projects, and I became more and more aware of this potential of combining skills together so that I could even apply it on small details like hanging my own pictures in my 3D models. This is a villa I designed for a friend here in Libya, so you're probably more familiar with this picture. And my latest artwork is a series of pictures that I call digital memories, and I had to go into exploring very new techniques I never tried before to express the very vivid, detailed, and scattered memories that manifest in our mind. So that is really something very personal that I really had to develop a personal approach for. And I think that we can come across this process of combining things together pretty randomly or by accident. So what I'd like to suggest is to really think about it very consciously. And because the process is pretty simple, it's just about exploring different activities, identifying which skills to combine to finally create something very personal and distinctive that defines our approach and style. And what I really think is, I'm aware that the environment I grew up in Belgium really helped me develop these different artistic skills and activities, while the situation here in Libya does not offer as many opportunities. However, I'd like to just point out a few things. And the first one is that being in an environment full of opportunities does not necessarily mean we are going to exploit those opportunities. While someone who's in an environment with very few opportunities may reach better achievements with some effort. And there are many, many real-life examples I can think of in both cases. The second point is that I really think we can start with very little resources. We don't have to go into, buying expensive equipment or, getting lessons and trainings, etc. I myself started playing music on a toy that my parents bought for my sister. I discovered my passion for photography using a very basic compact camera that's worse than most smartphones used today. And I learned the rendering process of architecture basically locked in my room, Sometimes during holidays I wanted to play video games instead, but I really had this in mind. So really I think it's more about genuine curiosity and strong perseverance. And all that happened before the explosion of internet learning videos. So, which brings me to the next point, that is, the internet is a real big game changer in the world of education today. And educating ourselves has become accessible to anyone who's got an internet connection, basically. And fortunately, it's becoming more and more common in Libya as well. And the very last point I'd like to mention is that I'd like to make you just think outside the box, I realize that most of the things that I talked about are artistic related. So the thing is, it's not necessarily related to art. I have a cousin who had a passion for motorcycles, and it helped him in many, many ways for another passion he developed for riding horses. So really, it's not related to art, and we should really open up the scope of possibilities with this concept. And so I really encourage anyone, not just those artistically inclined, to try an exploratory journey that may lead him or her to unexpected horizons. So to you who are curious about yourselves, I'd like to suggest you to take your inner guitar and explore your strings of passion and just play your own melody to the world. Thank you very much.